Hey, what's up, guys? An investor here. Welcome, everyone. We're going to be looking at the charts here. Time for a weekly update. It's been a little over a week here. I was trying to do a live stream earlier in the week. No excuses here, but the reason I didn't, I was just being lazy, of course. My office, which I normally do my streams out of, my setup is here and the mic and all that good stuff, had no internet for the last 3 days. Today was the first day it was back. And really, I mean, come on, how ridiculous is that? No internet for 3 days? I mean, if the power was out, it would have been back up within a day. Internet is just as critical. So I don't get it. But hey, it's back up. I could have done a live stream from home and all that good stuff. I just didn't. So welcome, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I am doing good. Thank you. I was looking at the comments in the last video and I was talking about my anniversary. A lot of really good comments, people, talking about how long they've been following the channel and how much they've learned over the years. And it's really means a lot to me, guys. I really appreciate that feedback and all that good stuff. So we're going to look at the charts today. Bitcoin is pushing over some near-term resistance here in the last day, not even day, half a day. So we'll be going over that, popping above, breaking, you can call it a bull break over this little symmetrical pattern that I've been looking at here for the last couple of days. Now, to be fair, and I was posting a little bit on the Slack group, right? There was two things I was looking at. One was, a potential double top that was forming on this daily chart. And a couple days ago, this is basically how it looked. And I thought this was a lower high. We certainly have the potential to be forming a double top. But then I also outlined my chart with this symmetrical pattern, and I stated that Bitcoin's also going symmetrical here, so it could just as easily go either way. At that time, I was flat. I was basically neutral, but I did have some sell stop and buy stop orders in place. Basically, I was thinking, my sell stops are down here. If it pops below that, breaks below that, bear break, I'm thinking double top. I'd be looking for a short trade at that point down to the 6K range, 6,100. And on the other side, I was looking at my exact number was 72.75, and so basically breaking over the line, then that triggered the long buy orders and looking for a break to the upside. And so far that's been good. Just kind of looking at where's the next upside target from here. And so let's go over that here. And I've already got them outlined here on the boxes. You can see that these were essentially my two targets, right? This was the double top slash bear break on the sim triangle downside target, which, now it's kind of negated. And now on the upside, the potential upside target, there's two really. There's an intermediate one, but the big target for me would basically be this 8K to 8,300 range or so. That's kind of a big upside target on the daily chart. First target here, at least anyway. If we do a measured move on this bigger pattern here, and I'm going to go a little bit more conservative, not go at the widest part of this here, but go from this swing low to this last swing high here. And if we extrapolate that out, that also puts it pretty close to that. That puts it right around 8,100. And so it gets it close to that big target. And if we look at the resistance points here, if you look left, then it's pretty clear to see that this here is going to be your first level of resistance. That's right around 7,900 and change, give or take. And then of course this last level of support back in here, that's your next big target. And I was looking at that as my first kind of big target, and that lines up pretty close with this. So hence the range that I'm looking at here for some near-term upside targets. But the price action has been really, I don't know how to say it, kind of boring lately up until today. We've kind of been in this chop, flop, consolidation. After the initial big bounce that we had, I mean, that was from a percentage basis, just a huge bounce. And then it just kind of went choppy as it consolidated and started to form this big symmetrical triangle pattern here. And there wasn't a whole lot of excitement. Yeah, you could have done some scalps, and I was doing kind of mostly short trades. I'd go short and then flat and then short. But then here the last week, just really choppy, kind of all over the place. Was good to kind of be a little bit more neutral, but looking for potentially some momentum coming back in here. We'll see if that plays out. So let's zoom in here a little bit. If you go to the 4-hour view here, I'm going to zoom in. There's a couple things to look at here, right? The 10 EMA on the 4-hour chart, because the move was so big, it's still way down here at 7,200. It's already had this nice little pop off the lows here and looking for a little bit of pause, maybe a bull flag up here, some pullback. What you'd like to see if this is going to hold, right? You're looking at this level first and then this level down here, right? Those are the kind of the basis for this upper trend line. You generally want to see some sort of bull flag form above those levels. That's the most bullish case. You could also see kind of a throwback to the line and then a go, right? That'd be the alternative case. But what you don't want to see is it start to close below that 7,200, maybe 7,300 line. If it does, that just looks like a fake out at that point, right? It looks like it was a big pop, fake out, and then you could start to see it pull back. I don't want to see it get much below 7,200 at this point. If it does, I'm going to start to be really suspect of the move. But on the plus side, you know, there could be, yes, this could be a short squeeze and all that good stuff, but the volume on this break higher was very bullish. I mean, if you look at the volume on this most recent push here on this last 4-hour candle, the highest volume you've seen since basically, you know, the 1st or the 2nd of April back here, right? So, I mean, this is the highest monthly volume here, at least on the Coinbase exchange. And so that's what I'm looking at is, you know, that's positive. That's bullish, right? I mean, in any case you look at it, if you look at the daily candle here, and again, this was from a time period, this was a pretty short move. I mean, on the lower time frames, that whole move happened in a very brief period of time. But on the daily candle, you know, there's still a lot of time left on this daily candle, so we'll see how it closes out. But not that exciting on the daily. Certainly it's above average and it's above at least the last week's worth of volume. But again, it's not as high as like this big reversal candle on the 16th. So, you know, it's just kind of been one of those weird price trading ranges here in the big picture, right? If you're looking at the lower time frames and you're trading a lot more margin, then yeah, there's definitely trades to be had. But, you know, kind of in the big picture of things, you know, we've been in this little consolidation. I'm hoping that this is the kickoff of some more momentum to the upside. We'll see if we can get to that 8Ks level. And above that, I mean, you're looking at, you know, the next real big target on the upside, if it gets that high, is, you know, you're talking basically that 9K 9100 level. And think about that. I mean, what a move that would be if we got that in this push, because that would just completely negate this insane washout day we saw where price basically over 2 days went from 8K down to 4K. And so that would be an insane recovery. That'd also be a nice decoupling of the broader market space, the global economy, which primarily Bitcoin has been tracking to, you know, over the big picture, right? Things have been moving in sync with the macro view of things. When COVID-19 really took off, this started to tank along with stocks, along with commodities, along with a whole bunch of other things. And, you know, not exactly, but to some extent, when stocks are green, Bitcoin's moving upward and vice versa. And so maybe we're starting to see finally that little bit of decoupling there from the macro point of view here. If we look at the stock market here real quick, and it's been an interesting week. I mean, there's earnings going on, which earnings season is usually good for me in terms of trading, just because there's plenty of things in play. But right now, you definitely need to take a macro view of things still, just because of the broader economy. But, you know, if you look at the stock market, we've had that tremendous bounce. We haven't really had that big pullback yet, but it has paused, right? This is kind of the zone I was looking at, these moving averages on the weekly. It certainly has paused there. We'll see if it can push higher. If there's any sort of good news, I'm thinking, coming out of COVID, if the economy finally starts to reopen, then yeah, you could see that big pop. Maybe we do get that V-shaped recovery. But as I've said, personally, I doubt it, at least not from a economic perspective, just because the damage that has been done has been tremendous with so many people losing their jobs and just all that craziness that happened. So maybe stocks rally a little bit more here, but in terms of the bigger picture, the economy, consumer spending, confidence numbers, all that I just don't see that recovering so quickly here. But there's been some big winners, obviously. Amazon making new highs here, Netflix pushing into new high ground here. They reported earnings recently, and so there's certainly some winners in the, you know, in the stock market space, but there's also a lot of big laggards here that are just still kind of bouncing right now. You know, you've got the FANG stocks, they're mixed, right? Amazon obviously is kicking butt. You have Apple starting to bounce here pretty good, and so it's just kind of mixed all around. But stock market is bouncing, but Bitcoin suddenly is looking much better, right? Starting to push higher, even if even if the stock market's kind of taken a little bit of a pause. Now, the big story, of course, this week in terms of commodities was the oil prices going negative and futures and all that craziness. But if you're looking at gold, I mean, gold is looking to push higher here along with Bitcoin. Still looking at that 1800 number as kind of the big target. It's slowly inching its way up there. After 1800, though, it's very close to new all-time highs. I mean, I think the exact all-time high was 19 and change. Then you'd be looking at 2000 as your next big target on gold. So just kind of working its, it's kind of its thing here as it kind of acts as that safety, that safe haven, which it generally is in times of uncertainty. But gold's already been in a big move here. Last year was the big breakout after a multi-year base, right? So the big move in gold was really last year when it started to break out. It's just kind of continuation at this point from that broader move. And so that's kind of been in play anyway for quite some time here. But going back to let me go look at the forex markets here, right? Looking at the DXY, that's the dollar index here. This is real interesting to see how this is going to play out. This is the weekly view of the DXY. It's starting to really coil up here, and it's going to be one of those next move wins type of things if it breaks out of this range here. And that's largely influenced by kind of the euro pair, the yen pair, some of the big majors, and they're basically looking the inverse of a lot of that. So this one here, the yen US dollars tried to break out, but it's still very much in range, but definitely one to be watching from a big picture perspective here. So going back to the crypto space here, I want to look at the Bitcoin dominance chart. Let's go to that real quick here. BTC dominance here. Let me dial it in on the daily chart here. So a couple of things that I'm watching here, right? So we had this initial drop. That was the alt rally. Very nice. Then the bump to, this was the alt rally. Then the pullback happened. Bitcoin dominance rose. 68 was my target there. It pretty much hit that. On the downside, I was looking at first target being 64. We've seen that here starting to bounce a little bit with this recent Bitcoin strength. But below that, if it continues to grind lower, then I'm looking at a retest of that 62. And in that scenario, I'm thinking lower, which means the alts would do well again. But maybe this is time for alts to lag a little bit and we get some Bitcoin dominance resurgence, especially going into the halving, which is now very much in view on the forefront for a lot of people. The chatter will certainly pick up in terms of BTC dominance here in the coming weeks, just because it's starting to get really close. And it's real interesting to see that if you look at this daily chart of BTC, this little symmetrical triangle, that apex lines up almost perfectly with where the halving is going to take place. But generally, these type of patterns, they don't wait until the apex is reached. Obviously, they don't coil up and go that flat. They generally will break out after you hit about 2/3 of the way into the pattern, maybe 3/4 at the most, but you're kind of in that range. So we were due for that breakout one way or the other here. And it's nice to see price going up. It's going to be curious to see if Bitcoin just kind of shakes off this big move and resumes its uptrend after the big shakeout that we saw. And even if you really zoom out and look at that big picture weekly chart, you still have this in play, right? This was a huge shakeout, but you still have this in play, and that's going to be a macro breakout if you finally get a push above this line. And the big number, to be honest, which if you look at the history of Bitcoin, the big number is that 10 to 12K range, right? I mean, in the history of Bitcoin, very little time has been spent trading over 12K. Very little time from a total life of Bitcoin, right? You had the history, and this is Coinbase, but if you go back like on Bitstamp, obviously pre-2015 was nowhere near that. But even after the bubble, right, you look at that, very little time. I mean, you're talking about a month and a half spent up here, and then a few wicks in middle of 2019 spent over 12K. There's been very little time spent over that. And then the big number, kind of the round psychological number, 10K, obviously a little bit more time spent in that, but still not that much. I mean, in the big scheme of things, Bitcoin 10K plus has seen, very few weeks in that camp, at least on a closing basis, right? You've seen a few wicks into that range. And so it's interesting to see that if you start to get this bullish break and we test this line, and finally break out 10K, right? Starting to hold above 10K from a weekly perspective, it's going to be interesting because now you're back into this territory. You're retesting the mid 2019 highs, but you're also breaking this downtrend from this big picture symmetrical triangle that's shaping up, and that could really kick off a macro bull trend. So definitely one to be watching. Again, that's big picture view. That's, you know, macro. Do we get there this week? No, probably not. But, you know, in the coming months, certainly over the summer, heading into the fall, that you got to keep that in mind, right? Because this is certainly shaping up to kind of kick something off. And with all the stimulus and all the insane printing of dollars, you know, there's been a lot of questions here on the stream. Hey, is that going to be bullish for Bitcoin? And yeah, the short answer is yes, it will be, but I think that's more of a longer term thing. Near term, right, Bitcoin is still very much trading to sentiment, reaction to the news, COVID, the economy, the stocks. There's just a lot of things in play right now. But this is certainly something to be watching here, especially with the halving coming up, you know, basically right in this, you know, line right here. So we're getting pretty close. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one all plays out. It will resolve itself this year, I expect. I don't think, you know, the price is just going to go tighter and tighter and tighter. I mean, we're going to break out of this pattern one way or the other here during 2020. So what a year it's been, though. 2020 has shaped up to be pretty rough. You know, I remember thinking a few years back, wow, 2020, like, sounds so futuristic. The future is here, and what's life gonna be like in 2020? I don't know if anybody expected this. I mean, it's been an insane year, to say the least. There's been so many firsts, not just in finance places, geopolitical, you know, pandemic, just so many firsts. It's just insane. But here we are. So what we got. It's what we got to go with. And so what I'm looking at here near term, if you're looking at it from a trading perspective, very narrow view of the things, right? Very short term perspective here. Look at these moving averages on the 1 hour chart. That's generally when things move that fast, I dial it down to a lower time frame. Again, as I mentioned at the start, ideally a little bit of a bear flag pause here above, you know, 7,200 would be the best case scenario. But if you do see a spike down, look for a retest of kind of that short-term moving average somewhere in between. That'd be an ideal place to start looking at it, potentially a re-entry point if you missed. But that's what I'm looking at here. If it starts to lose those levels, right, that 7,200, then doesn't look so good anymore. But for now, bulls showing a little bit of life here, a little bit of a pop to the upside here. And we have certainly plenty of levels of resistance along the way to be watching for targets, which that makes it easy from a trading perspective. If you're looking for upside targets, a lot of resistance to be watching on the long way up. So certainly places to scale, places to look for pauses along the way. But for now, that's what we got here. Let's look at some of the other names here on the list before we move on. Looking at the Node Insider metrics here. The 4-hour strategy went long yesterday at my 10:30 a.m. So it's been long for 26 hours now or so. And the daily bot went long, and I think that's the first time it's gone long since, holy moly, since, I don't know, I think February was the last time that daily bot was long. I'm gonna have to go look at that here because it's been a long time. It's been a long time since it's been long. So yeah, it had to be back in here, back in February. So it's been pretty much either flat or short for some time. I remember the daily bot went short on February 26th. So I'm guessing it was probably flat a couple days before that. So yeah, mid-February is probably the last time we saw a long signal on that daily bot. So interesting to see that it flashed long today here. 4-hour has been long off and on over the last couple of weeks anyway, just with the, obviously it's a 4-hour chart, so different time frame. But yeah, it went long yesterday at 10:30. Some names trending right now versus Bitcoin. We'll look at some of these here. I noticed Cardano's been on the list. It has been in play already. Theta was on the list here. A bunch of small cap names. Somebody's asking about Digibyte. There it is on the list right now. You know, Knoll, Zen, you got Tezos on the list here. So a pretty mixed bag, but it's good. It's good to see the mixture. It's not just all small caps or micro caps. It's certainly across the board. So we'll see how this looks, especially in light of the recent Bitcoin pop to the upside, generally the Bitcoin alt pairs take a little bit of a hit. But we'll look at the bigger picture view. Looking at the bot status and the BMI ratings for some of the bigger cap names. Let me filter this here. So Stellar, Cardano, and Tezos long on both 4-hour and daily bots. A little bit of a mixed bag though. You've got some weakness, Bitcoin Cash, short. You got IOTA, short, and everything else just kind of flat short mixed. So not a ton, but we'll look at these here. All right, let's get to it. So I'm going to start with these big cap names first, and then I'll go through some of the other names on the list here, the smaller mid cap names here. So let's look at these here. Stellar, Cardano, and Tezos first here. I'm going to go from the BTC pair on these guys. So looking at Cardano, and I think I have it here already. So Cardano in play here. And again, we were looking at this one. I believe this was the last live stream. We were looking at this little pause, certainly some levels to be watching, but look at this. I mean, it had a nice break and had a pretty good rally, which took out the prior highs, then went on a little bit of a consolidation, and then here today, nice push higher, and it's just been in play. So very nice. Getting a little wide and loose here on the most recent couple candles, but still very much in play. Looking at the bigger picture here, I'm going to zoom out to the daily chart. You're at the first target already on the upside, so I'd be looking at this level here, and then next level up is right there. So you're kind of in the middle ground. It would not surprise me to see a little bit of a pause here and then a continuation to the next level up, but it's already had a pretty decent move here. But yeah, pretty good. So looking at Stellar XLM. Actually, before I do that, let me go Cardano dollar pair, see if that makes does anything for us here. Nice bull break on this one here today. Basically had this breakout above that 36.7 mark, and it's pretty much again at the next target. Above that, you're looking at 4.5 to 5 cent level. Dollar pair looks like it has more room to go, and it probably could if Bitcoin continues to do its thing. But the BTC pair, it's a little riskier here if you were to jump on it now. If I was in it, I'd probably just keep riding it to the next target, but that's me. XLM, BTC here. Nice push here. Look at these last 3 days. Boom, 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 man. Nice break after pushing above this. And look at this was multiple resistance, by the way. If you look left, look at how almost symmetrical that is. Prior support here back in February. Loses the level, bounces into it mid-March, can't handle it, pulls back, double bottom, bounces right into that support, pulls back, and then breaks and just almost straight up to the next level. It's just amazing how simple sometimes those horizontal price points just make it seem here. But yeah, pushing higher, and of course, this is what you're looking at here next is if it continues to push higher, then you're looking at the 900 plus sat level as your next upside target. So good stuff. If I wasn't on this, would I be chasing it now? Probably not. At least not until I saw some sort of I don't know, bull flag or consolidation at this point. But there's a lot of volume coming in here. Highest volume since the move at the top generally starts to signal some profit taking. So I'd be cautious here. These last couple candles are showing some signs of distribution. Doesn't mean it comes crashing down, but it looks like it's finally ready for a pause. We'll see. The other one, Tezos. Let me zoom out here a little bit. Looking at the 4-hour view, Tezos had that bullish break out of that symmetrical pattern here. This was last week on the 15th, and just has continued to grind higher since then. So very nice. If you look at that daily chart, not only did it break that symmetrical pattern here on the very short time frame, but it's also breaking out of this broader daily downtrend. So looking good here. Looks like it's probably going to want to retest these upper regions here at this point. But the momentum, the trend is your friend, and yeah, this makes sense that this has been showing strong. Let's see here. The bot on Tezos has been long since Tuesday and was long on April 7th on the daily bot. Wow, really? April 7th. Man, that was a good catch. So the daily Tezos BTC bot went long on that candle there. Not too shabby. Not too shabby. All right. Hey, what's up, Jason? Let's see what else here. So those were the biggies there. Before I go into some of the names on the comments here, let's see what else we got. Everex, small cap, man. I remember some of these names. There's a Tika name right there. Constellation. Oh, no, that's a different one. Credit. Gosh, a lot of names from yesterday. Let's go look at that Digibyte and Theta chart there. So Digibytes, pull it up on the Trex here. Nice little push there. Wow. And again, I don't know what's driving this here. I don't know if they've done anything on the project or what. I haven't done any research on this, but that's a good break there. I mean, look at that weekly chart finally breaking these moving averages. This is the first time that the weekly 10 EMA is trading above the 22 EMA since August of 2018. Wow. Nice. Hey, maybe you're finally getting a trend change in the alts. But, man, first time in a long time. But, yeah, it's definitely looking good. This daily chart's been looking really nice. You had a pullback entry here. Even if you wanted to wait to be sure, you could have waited until it popped here. And you got that breakout. And even after that point, you'd still be, you're up 42% there. So, pretty nice little move there on Digibyte. What was the other one? Theta showing on the trending list here. Still weekly chart, still kind of flat, consolidating. Not a whole lot on the daily either. It's very just kind of, look at how wide and loose this is, just kind of all over the place. Definitely tradable if you want to, if you're looking at the lower time frames, but these are much tougher just because of liquidity issues. But it is breaking above some resistance there, trying to trend higher. It still has to overcome this little thing here, but showing a little bit of near-term bullish action there versus Bitcoin. What do we got? Zen? Nah, we'll skip Zen. Let's see. We looked at Stellar. We looked at Tezos. Dash. Let's see here. Dash. The Dash. Not on Polo. Interesting on Dash here. So what was I looking at? Looking at the target there, pulling back. These are some old markups here, by the way. I haven't updated my charts here in a while. Honestly, I've been in a little bit of a hiatus here in the last week and a half. A little bit of trading here and there, not a ton. Just obviously mornings looking at stocks, but not a lot of crypto trading. Some Bitcoin long short trades, but I would not call it hyper trading. It's been a lot shorter, or looking at higher time frames, I guess, is mostly what I've been looking at. But yeah, I don't know. Dash is just kind of, I'm neutral on it. I mean, it's showing up on the trending list here for whatever reason. There must be some underlying momentum starting to build, but I'd just be watching that. That's really the thing to be watching. Maybe a little ascending base starting to form here, but over, what is that, 11.6 on the BTC pair, then yeah, it could probably take off from there. So definitely worth watching. I'm gonna put an alert here on the daily chart. If it pops over that, I definitely want to know about that. Oh, what else? Okay, so let's see here. Ignis, Status, Vertcoin. Well, we'll skip those unless somebody really wants to look at those. Let's see, Engine. Looking at the Engine coin. Engine, big picture view, definitely starting to get some momentum going here. Just kind of starting to test this out. Looks like I already had this marked up, but those would be your next two big targets on the upside. And can't complain right now. It's right at resistance, but it looks like it's pushing, so can't complain on that guy. Link, how's Link looks? Link has had quite the move. A little bit of just edging up slowly over the last week. I remember, it feels like forever ago, but that was this week was 2 weeks ago. Push right up to resistance again, right? Another lesson learned, and there's your target. It's just kind of been pausing, but what happens now is it's consolidating just below the resistance level, and it's letting moving averages catch up. It's doing a lot of that. So this is definitely setting out for a potential secondary move up, which is a good thing to be watching here. So if you look at it on the shorter time frames, again, this is a Link BTC pair, but I like when charts start to get this tight. It's not a jump the wagon type of move for me, right? I usually will wait for some confirmation. But what I'll look at is, just basically keep it tight, right? I mean, at this point, if it takes that level out, that's a nice bear break or bull break, excuse me. If you wanted to go a little bit earlier, then you look at kind of the trend line break. So for me, that'd be 5,200 basically on the BTC pair, confirmed over 52.5. Above that, then looks like another bullish continuation move. Until then, probably nothing for me to do, just because this could also pause. Well, here we go. This could also pause here, and maybe you get a little double top scenario, right? So I'm not going to front run it at this point. I'll just wait for a bull break. But not too shabby. Let's see, Link USD. Yeah, Link USD is looking better, but that's because Bitcoin's having its move. And in the big scheme of things, I mean, the trend is still your friend here recently. I mean, if you look at the price action, after breaking out of this range here on April 6th, it's been nothing but positive uptrend, right? Higher highs and higher lows. Moving averages are trending upward. They're bullishly correlated, meaning the 10 EMA is above the 22 EMA. So from a technical perspective, yeah, this is the trend is your friend. It's been an uptrend. Dips are buyable, on and on and on. And then in that case, I'd be looking at $4.40 to $4.70 as my next target. The question is always, are you looking at it from the USD pair? Are you coming in from that angle? Sometimes that makes sense, right? Like a lot of times I only look at USD side if I'm trading margin or something, and I really don't care about the BTC pair because I'm coming in from a cash position. Other times it's like, well, I'm holding BTC. Do I want to flip into an alt and see if I can get some outperformance there, right? So it just depends on which way you're coming from. All right, so looking at the BTC pair again, or BTC USD chart again here. I know some of you guys are just joining here. We looked at this right at the start. If you missed it, I won't go into it in as much detail this second time around. So look at the beginning of the stream for that. But there's been a bullish break on this little symmetrical pattern here. To be fair, I was neutral before the break. I posted on the Slack a couple days ago saying I was looking at two things. There was the potential for a little double top to be forming here. At the time we were at the end of this red candle, I was looking at this. So I was just basically sitting flat with buy and sell orders depending on which way it broke. So I was just basically going to let the market tell me which way to go. And then we started to see a bullish pop here yesterday, and then a nice little finally break to the upside today. The levels that I was watching here in the short time frame, my exact number was 72.75 as far as buy stops go. But basically this trend line breaking above that was good. You could have got in earlier, breaking above 71.50. That would have been good too. On the downside for me, it was basically a break below. Yeah, right there. It was a break below 6,800 for me on the short side. If it would have broken that, I would have gone short. It didn't, so that didn't happen. And then on the targets, the downside target would have been around 6K, 6,100. Upside target for me, first one is around that lower 8K number, so 8,100 to 8,300. And then above that, right, if we look at the big picture view, the weekly view, the macro picture, you've got a lot of things happening here. There's a big confluence of events starting to go on. You have this downtrend line, of course, which has been resistance here for now, so that puts it just below 10K. 10K is also a big psychological number that Bitcoin just hasn't spent a lot of time trading above in its history, and more importantly, 12K, right? So you've got a lot of kind of overhead, but breaking above that, right? If we start breaking into this zone from a macro view of things, that just sets up for a potentially big bull trend here going forward. And I'm talking months out, right? I'm talking like, going into 2021 type of thing, but that's going to be interesting, right? And you got to remember that the biggest thing Bitcoin has going for it is the supply-demand fundamentals, right? You've seen Bitcoin's inflation rate, right? It's like this, and it starts to flatten out, and then eventually it does one of these as the new Bitcoin being mined slowly starts to go flat, right? It gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and essentially we're right here. It's like 90% or 80% of all the Bitcoin has already been mined. 18 million out of 21 million. And you look at that, right? It's just simple fundamental economics, right? It's just demand, supply, and demand. And at that point, there's going to be a point in time where there's just that intersection of price and demand, where suddenly it's like the inflation curve is flat enough to the point where new supply doesn't matter as much as demand matters more. So there's only one answer to that, right? If people want more Bitcoin, prices got to go up. That's the biggest thing that Bitcoin has going for it, hands down. And you got to keep that in mind, right? When you start talking about the bigger picture, you know, here we are at this point in time. You got the halving coming up by 2021. Things start to look, you know, certainly different. Yeah, and I get it, right? Bitcoin futures and all that. There's going to always be the case for derivatives, Bitcoin ETFs, and Bitcoin options and margin and all that. But at the end of the day, the institutions, right, the big money crowd, they're going to be looking at the spot price. And if Bitcoin truly does start to go into that category of new all-time highs, right, 20K Bitcoin, 50K Bitcoin, all that stuff, then holding BTC in a wallet is going to be tremendous, right? People are going to start looking at that like reserves, right? It's going to be the new kind of digital gold. It already is in a lot of ways, but that's going to be an important factor at that point. So just the potential is there for sure. It's always interesting. But, you know, I'm not going to be the one to say that's going to happen for sure. There's people saying $1 million Bitcoin, all that stuff, because, you know, the way I see things is this is such a unique asset in the sense that it's just so independent from the status quo that it's a threat, right? It just truly is a threat, and the powers that be could just as easily say, you know what, this is too much of a threat that it is now illegal to purchase anything with it, blah, 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 it's national security, blah, blah, blah. And in that scenario, I mean, I get it. The network will stay alive. The block transactions will continue to flow. But if the average person has a hard time getting into it or feels like they're breaking the law because they do, you know, I just don't see it, right? I just don't. I mean, the price will just drop drastically at that point. And so that regulatory aspect is still very much a threat out there in the big picture. You know, what would change that is if this was the alternative, right? If global currencies started to really collapse and people flocked to it regardless of what the regulation was, that would change things, right? Just like we saw in Venezuela, stuff like that. But yeah, I'm not saying Bitcoin's going to go away. Don't misread me. And there's just a lot that it has going for it, right? You can't stop the network. You can't, you know, all that stuff. But it's always interesting. But from a price action perspective, I guess is what I'm trying to frame it. So, all right. So what else, guys? What is going on here? Do you guys want to look at any other stocks, any charts before I wrap this one up here? Let me look at the comments here. ADA pushing again. Yeah, thank you for the likes, the thumbs up. Stella Lumens. I think that's it. Oh yeah, let me do some of the bigger cap names before we wrap it up here. Looking at ETH, we didn't look at this chart here. Looking at the ETH BTC pair, man, ETH had such a very nice run here recently. There was a couple of cues, you know, along the way. You had this big falling wedge. Of course, we were all saying alts are due for a rally, and they finally did. That one single day pop was beautiful. Then it just kind of started to give you this flag right to the moving averages, and boom, another leg up. Pretty nice. Now I'm wondering, was that it? Are we due for a pause, pull back to the moving averages, or is this really a good trend, right? Did April kick off a new trend that will last for longer and ultimately take out this swing high here? So that's the big target to be watching on ETH. The next target up would be way up here, so that'd be a huge move. From the USD side of things, a little bit more Bitcoin centric now at this point. You got this lower trend line that's still very much holding. Let me extrapolate that out. Still very much holding, so until that changes, clearly the trend is your friend, especially if Bitcoin continues to rally. And in that scenario, right, my first target on the upside was at 180, 190 level. We've hit that. Above that, then I'm looking at the low 200s, so 210 to 220 would be what I'd be watching as the next target for ETH USD. The other bigger cap names here, real quick, Bitcoin Cash. There was some comments on the Slack channel talking about, remember that stream when Bitcoin Cash was the flippening, when it was going to take over the world? And yeah, those were some interesting times, man. I remember that. People were really wondering, like, could this really happen? Now it's almost an afterthought now, right? People don't really even ask that question anymore, except for maybe fake Satoshi and what's his face. But Bitcoin Cash still very much under resistance. Not a whole lot to do there. Litecoin has been the laggard, breaking below support here today, in fact. So relative to Bitcoin has not been the place to be. And what I'd be watching on Litecoin BTC is basically a break of this downtrend, right? If it can break out of that, or another climactic wash to the downside, and then see if it could bounce from there. And what was the other one? Oh, XRP. And XRP is, well, XRP. Just not a whole lot versus Bitcoin. Probably tradable, but just all over the place. Okay. I'm thinking that's it, my friends. Man, it's already 1 o'clock my time, so I'm going to probably wrap it up, go get some lunch, get some afternoon tea or coffee or something, and see what the rest of the day looks like. So thanks for being here as always. I appreciate you guys, appreciate the comments, and we'll see you all in the next one.